Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Stephen Hawking have all sounded the warning about artificial intelligence. Why does this sound so familiar to me? Welcome to my channel. I focus on tabletop role-playing games, video games, and science fiction. Back in 1983, yes, way back then, I was working for a small company called YCAT Systems, doing manipulation of math, doing symbolic manipulation, which actually is arguably a form of artificial intelligence. What would happen is you could enter an equation into the computer and tell the system to solve it, and it would solve it symbolically, not numerically unless there was a numerical answer. But it could simplify equations, it could do integration, it could do differentiation. So this was part of AI. Now, in 1982, Japan created the fifth generation project. And there was a lot of press coming out of Japan. At this time, Japan had really come onto its own in manufacturing and was taking over much of the silicon manufacturing and the creating chips, and everybody was worried that Japan was taking over the world. This was a big concern because they were jumping into artificial intelligence. They wanted to jump over, to take a leapfrog over the current process of building software and do a whole new approach. And part of that approach was the language called Prolog. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with Prolog, Prolog is an inference engine, basically. You make statements and it tries to infer things. The interesting thing is that after spending hundreds of millions of dollars, some argue into the billions, that the whole thing petered out after a decade, and the Japan ministry that was in charge of this ended up offering the software that they had developed to anyone who wanted it. No one would touch it because it was just a boondoggle, as the saying goes, that they had went down a rabbit hole that they thought that they could solve because they thought they could leapfrog over everything because this was a different approach to solving the same old problems that have been profound throughout computer software development. They thought they could make things so much easier. They thought they could develop software so much faster that it was a true start of artificial intelligence. Well, why did it fail? I'll put some links to some interesting articles about why it failed, but in general it was that they underestimated the complexity of the problem. That it really was very complicated to do some of the things that they really wanted to do. And we see that today. Websites are, you can call up somebody and say, I want to create a website, and pointing and clicking and putting everything together to make it pretty. That's almost all automated. But somebody still has to put it together, update it, and maintain it. That's the problem that all these systems seem to forget about. That's why Bill Gates and Elon Musk and Zuckerberg and even Stephen Hawking, if you look at some of their articles, they're worried about, oh, what are we going to do with all these people? Well, let's be honest. Some of the jobs that people have are going to go away. That's always been true. I love the speech in Other People's Money about buggy whips. If you haven't heard that, look that up, Other People's Money and buggy whips. And it's the interesting argument that technology changes. And the argument that was made in the speech was, how would you have liked to have been an investor in a company that made buggy whips when cars started coming around and started becoming popular? And he said, it's just, you're going down the tubes, slow but sure. So if you were, that's all you knew how to make was buggy whips, and things happen. Now, that there are the Amish country, there are people out here who still live a much simpler life, but it's not a big consumer. They're not big consumers of products. They grow their own, they live on their own, and if you want that kind of lifestyle, you can. You can have that. If you want to live in a high technology society where you can get your newest iPhone or whatever, you have to live in a society where things change rapidly. Now, you see people, what's happening is they keep trying to bump the minimum wage up. Companies are looking at automating more and more. You think about it. 5 years ago, or let's say 10 years ago, don't know when it was first introduced, you used to go to a fast food restaurant and say, I want a Pepsi or a Diet Coke or something, and the person taking your order or someone behind the counter would fill up that glass, fill up that cup, and give it to you. Today, you go in and they hand you a cup and you go fill it yourself. Why? Cuts down the cost of the for the store, for the fast food place, because it's faster to give it to you and let you fill it up and deal with the eccentricities of the machine. And now it gives you wider variety. We're seeing that there is a wider variety of sodas today in most fast food joints, but you're also seeing things are being more and more automated. At one point in time, if you wanted a burrito, I remember, when I was going to college, frozen burritos existed way back then. Yes, they still existed. You could go and get to the grocery store or the 7-Eleven. You could get a frozen burrito, put it in the microwave. They haven't changed much really in quality. But what happens is that at one point in time, they were handmade. Then companies figured out how to automate that. No one complained when they automated the creation of frozen burritos. Nobody complains about that. We go to the grocery store and you walk in and go into the frozen aisle, and how much of that do you think is handmade? I mean, it's there. There are some, but what happens is that automation is coming through and is automating those jobs away. Now, what does that mean? Well, it's like your car. Cars are built and so on, and even if you've got a Tesla or whatever, however automated the manufacturing process is, you're driving down the street and a deer jumps up out in front of you. This happened to a friend of mine, and you hit the deer. Well, the poor deer dies because it doesn't stand a chance against the car. It was not intentional, but you've now got damage to your vehicle. Now, can you imagine a system that can automate and repair that? Well, every time you think you can, you find more in unusual ways for a car to be damaged. I remember seeing a friend of mine, he was sitting there and he says, see the mark on the side of his car is dented in the side of the car. What had happened was there had been an accident and the wheel from a truck went bounding up over like a wall and it hit on the side of his car. It literally threw the wheel 20 feet in the air and it flew down and hit his car. I remember driving around the DC Beltway. There's a portion where there's a big wall, and flying over the wall is a golf ball that hits and lands on my hood of my car. Put a nice little dent in my car. Now, you could go, how do you repair that? Well, a lot of places, that's hard to find something that can handle this because it's no longer standardized. It has to be automated. So you're always going to see some need for services for someone who can repair these type of things. Even me, I've built my computers, I know the parts. There was a period of time when my computer crapped out. Actually, it's happened to me twice, where I didn't have the time to figure it out. I'd spent too much time trying to get it working, and I just pack it up and take it over to one of the computer places and tell them, fix it. I know it's going to cost me money, but I don't have the time. So I'm willing to pay for somebody to diagnose the problem and solve the problem. And you're always going to see that, no matter what it is. If it's your car, if it's your computer, if it's your phone. You see the kiosks in the mall where you've dropped your phone and it's cracked and you got to get it repaired, or they do various things to it, or they customize it. So you want it customized. That's always going to be true. What we're going to see, it says very few people today wear handmade clothing. I mean, there are people who do that. And if you look at the ultra rich, their clothing is almost always hand customized to their body shape. Well, somebody has to do that. Now, if you have the machines that make it easier, that's going to be there. But even if you look at like custom silk suits that are made in Taiwan or whatever, you go there and have the suits made, they can make the suits up very quickly, but they've automated the process as much as possible, but it's still that hand touch that people value. Why do people prefer homemade bread to store-bought bread? Now, Panera bread is good, but homemade bread, if you've ever had, somebody who actually makes the homemade bread, there's that little bit of love, I guess is the phrase that goes in there. People are willing to pay for that. I'm amazed at some of the weird services that I've seen. A friend of mine found a service that would come in and clean up the dog crap out of their backyard. Their dog would defecate in the backyard, and they actually had somebody who would come in on a weekly basis and clean it all up for a fairly small amount of money. But that means that they didn't have to do that. It made it so much easier for them that they were willing to pay someone to do that. And you think about it, and you go, yeah, I don't want to deal with picking up dog droppings. So I'll have somebody come in and clean it because clean up after my dog. You have people come in, and I live here in an apartment complex, and I'm amazed every Tuesday they come through and mow the lawns and they do all the yard work. I'm not into yard work at all, but there are people who do that. Now, there's always going to be people who need something done in their yard. I listen to my family and about how they like their yard, but there's still things that they have somebody else come in and do. Be it you need to have somebody come in and fertilize it, or if you get a larger section, or maybe you're not comfortable about tilling all your soil if you're planting a garden, or you have somebody else come in and do all that work. So the service economy is always going to be there, and it's growing. That's where it's growing. Now, are those jobs high-paying jobs? Generally not. However, there are exceptions. If you are an expert tailor, you can make not a great living, but a pretty good living. Barbers, hairstylists, they make a living. They don't make a great living, but there's always people who are going to be wanting that done for them. So that's the economy that's growing. As the population grows, more and more people will want services, because they will want, as they come into the middle class, as they start making a little bit of money, the first thing they do is improve their diet. They want to have better quality. So rather than they may, if they're really poor, they're making their own bread because that's the cheapest. If they're, as soon as they can, they start buying, store-bought bread, and then they start, when you've got a little bit of cash, you'll splurge occasionally, like go to Panera or some other place that makes the better quality bread, the higher quality. I love Panera's cheese bread, and there are various things like that that are great. Those are something that you can go and buy, and you'll spend money on the little bit of extra quality when you've got it. And those are the places that are always going to be growing. So this statement that yes, there's a danger of the AI is going to start replacing jobs. Well, yeah, it's going to change jobs. I mean, you look at Uber and all this stuff that's going on with delivery, because that's another thing that's going to be happening. I'm in an area where, and I was sort of surprised when I first noticed. I ordered something from Amazon, and it came back, and I pick up the package, and it doesn't have UPS, doesn't have FedEx. It's not the Postal Service, but it's Amazon delivery. So Amazon delivers in the area that I live in, which means I can sign up for Amazon Fresh, which I probably will shortly, but for delivery of some groceries. And there are people talking, things about delivery in a couple of hours or so on. So there's this massive delivery infrastructure that's there. And if, say, you are a driver for Uber or whatever, you need your car maintained. So car mechanics, cars are getting more and more complicated. They're not the simple car. My first car was a 1964 Ford Galaxy 500. And you could pop open the hood, and you could see all the part. You could see where the oil filter was. You could reach in and change the oil filter by hand. I know I did once or twice. You could see the spark plugs. There was room enough to almost climb in with the engine on either side, because it was a big car, and there was a lot. The engine was smaller and simpler and easier to maintain. Now today, I pop the hood on my car, and there's some space. Things have somewhat miniaturized. Then I remember one new car I had. I popped open the hood, and I go, "There's no space to put anything in there." But I couldn't identify hardly anything in there because it was just so packed. Things have got a lot more organized in the past because things improve over time with cars, but a mechanic still has to get in there and do something occasionally. And you say, "Oh, but they're so reliable and robust," and then you hear about something happening to someone. I remember with a friend, we were driving down the road, and a pheasant flew out across the road and went through their radiator. Yes, that killed the pheasant. And it put a nice, great big hole where the head of the pheasant went through the radiator. We were driving on a freeway, and that was kind of damaging. And things like that always happen. I mean, you look at all these accidents that occur. You don't intend for something to happen, but your favorite watch, if you have a watch. I remember this happening to me. When I was a little boy, I had this watch that was given to me, and it dropped and broke, and trying to get it repaired was almost impossible. And if you have something that you like, finding someone who can repair that. Now they have to charge for their time, and they're going to do that. But we're getting into the economy where people want something repaired. I bought some pants from Amazon, and they didn't have the length that I needed, so I took them to get them taken up someplace, and it cost almost as much to have the pant leg shortened as it did to buy the pants in the first place. Was a lesson that I learned. No, make sure you get the pant length that you want on your clothing. But we're seeing Amazon ordering, and what happens? What would you do if somebody says, "Oh, I can come in and adjust the pant leg length to meet your exact length. If I'll come to your house and do that adjustment." What would you pay for that? So you take a look at it. Now, they may think about it. You could create a machine that all it did was sew up pant legs, and they could come into your house and do that. But it's the customized service. So am I worried about this AI displacing people? No, I'm not worried about it. Then they go, oh, but we're going to, get upset with what the AI does. The classic example was Microsoft's chatbot called Tay, which is an interesting experience in exercise in artificial intelligence. It was trying to process the language and come back and understand that. The problem with Tay was that it started to learn from what people were saying to it, and that's not what people wanted. Tay actually worked correctly. It was doing what it was designed to do, but people didn't like the results. It's like there's this software which can determine what gender you are and your sexual preferences from just looking at you and so on. Now, why is that a problem? You can make certain, when you see somebody's picture, we do this instinctively. If you see someone, you instinctively try to estimate what gender they are. Now, there's this whole thing about gender fluidity, which I don't believe, but what happens is that you generally try to make some sort of assumption, some sort of determination. Is that person male or female or what? Now, if we do that in our normal day-to-day business, just as we go around there, software can make those same kind of assumptions and get about the same amount of accuracy. Now, the other questions, it's like, can you look at someone and see, what their sexual preferences are? Okay, a lot is how people look and things like that, and I believe that there is some validity in that, but people don't like that because it's realistic. You're disagreeing with the results that is trying to be objective. The software tries to be objective. It's not making a subjective analysis. It's based upon what it's doing, and you start feeding things through. If you built a neural network and you started putting pictures in, and the results were, is this person gay or not? True, false question. And you start training it to do the neural network, you may not like the result that you would get, but the algorithm is there, and the algorithm is independent. So what happens is that people are upset about artificial intelligence for, to me, somewhat phony reasons. They don't like the results they're seeing, and they don't like the idea that people will have to change jobs. When I look at what I do, I'm software architect, or solutions architect. What happens is that I tend to, if it's fun, I will do it. If it's not, and there's a bit of it to work, I would hand it off to junior developers to do, rather than me doing it, because there are more of them. They can get it done, and I can just check their work, and they learn from it. That's the advantage there, and I don't have to deal with these things that I find tedious. That was just my way of handling all of that. But you take a look at what's going, all this upset. Now, the last thing to talk about is militarization of AI. But what You have to understand, where did computers come from? Why was the first computer created? The first computer was really the first large scale computer was created to calculate ballistic trajectories of artillery rounds, or of artillery for the Navy. They were trying to improve the accuracy of the naval guns. And it was also applicable to the Army for their howitzers and their indirect fire weapons. So the same thing is, that was the purpose of the computer. That's what it was built for. That's why the first said, we think there might be a market for IBM. Head of IBM thought there could be a market for only so many computers because nobody had that. They didn't even think about accounting and how it totally automated accounting and changed everybody having to use adding machines, how adding machines improved the accuracy of the results, but there was still all the work to enter all that in and key that in and make sure that that was correct. And today we have a fairly automated accounting system throughout most companies. So that changed. People's jobs changed. Computers changed all of that. But we talk about militarization. Okay. So they can make their weapons more accurate. Well, that's something we've been doing. I talked about the strategy of technology about Jerry Pournelle. That was one of the books that he was involved with writing. He was listed as one of the authors. And technology has always been applied to the military. We take a look back at, it says, why does canned food exist? Well, it was to be able to provide food for the troops. Sort of interesting to see down in the Florida Keys, the Chinook helicopters are arriving, dropping off food and water, and what food they're dropping off is MREs. So it's going to be interesting to see how civilians feel about eating MREs. But the ability to package and create the food that is light, that has a long shelf life, was designed for the military. And we're seeing the same thing with AI. It's going to be more accurate finding targets. And they're going, but they're going to create killer robots. Yeah, so what? We've always seen that. The interesting argument is you look at some of the things that were invented in World War II. You could argue a cruise missile is a killer robot. What do you mean? It's a missile. It has a warhead. We launch it. It goes out and kills things and blows itself up in the process. So, isn't that's been around for quite a while now? That goes back into the 1980s. So what happens is that we've always militarized that. It's just how what your definition is. I will argue that a cruise missile is a killer robot. And how can you say it's not? And because it's designed to go and destroy a particular target. And it will follow the terrain and it will find the target and destroy it. So we've got killer robots now. We've had killer robots for decades. We don't think of them as robots. They don't look like the robots in the movies, but that's because they're not as efficient. Robots in the movies aren't as efficient. I mean, why would you send it, if the enemy is in a particular area and that's their stronghold, why would you send individual robots to destroy them? Why not just bomb it? That's much more efficient, much more cost effective. Takes less energy to do that. So if that's where they are, now scouts are another thing, but we have drones flying around like that, and we've had Predator missiles that are up there, Predator drone, the Predator drone with the missiles that are on them. Now, are they killer robots? Depends upon what your definition of robot is. they're controlled by a human, but then so is a cruise missile. Somebody picks the target, launches it, it's fire and forget. So that we've seen this the phrase fire and forget is very true. Most missiles on our fighter planes or so on are fire and forget. You aim at a target, you fire at the target, and the pilot doesn't have to worry about them anymore because the missile knows how to track in on the target. So they're arguably killer robots because they have that. If you go back in World War II, we tried to invent various things. There was the one about putting pigeons that would peck to try and get the missile to hit ships. We've done some interesting things, and we've done them with a variety of technology. Now, so it's there. I don't see any real threat that hasn't been there all along. People are going to lose their jobs. They're going to have to change their jobs. Technology is constantly changing. There was the interesting it's the old phrase. It says, the man behind the plow, he says the reason, I can't remember the exact phrase, but it says the guys behind the plow, and it says why does that work? And it says because the mule knows what he's doing. And the person behind the plow really is not as important as the mule who's doing all the real work. And we're seeing that's going to be happening throughout. It's going to be the person who handles the things that the system isn't great at doing. Loading the hoppers on the machines that produce something, like they produce the frozen pizza. You keep you keep loading the pepperoni in there so that the computer spreads the pepperoni out on top of the pepperoni pizza, and then it gets whisked away and put there. And it's handling the unexpected. That's where humans are good at. It's handling the unexpected. So you'll always have someone to watch. Maybe it's a whole factory that's going on there, but you need someone who can see if something is going wrong and handle the unexpected. Now, what does that mean for people's jobs? Well, people are always going to have to change jobs, I think. I was lucky. I've been blessed. My job has changed significantly from when I started, but I've always loved it, and I've loved the changes in technology, and I keep going there. So I think Bill Gates, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, and Stephen Hawking are just overblown, because I've heard these worries before. We were worried that Japan was going to take over the world, and that was an absolute bust. Now we're worried that AI is going to change the world. Well, it's going to make some changes. It's made changes. We have killer robots. We've had them for decades. So, that they're just overblown. To me, they're trying to push their narrative. The world is not changing the way they want it to change. And it's not changing the way I want it to change, but that doesn't matter. I don't care. I'm not worried about that. So, like to hear your comments. Do you think I'm just an old windbag talking about this? But I'll put some links in the description about all the 5th generation project and how it became Japan's lost generation and what happened to Prolog as opposed to Lisp, which are programming languages. This was an interesting one. I keep hearing all this worry about AI. It's the major threat to our society. And I think it's just a pile of crap, because it's been there forever. Not forever. It's been there for a long time. And it's nothing to really worry about. If you've got some sort of job in service industry, be prepared to change your job. But that's always been true. So thank you for watching. I look forward to learning what you think about this video. Let me know in the comments below. If you like the video, press the thumbs up button. You can subscribe by clicking the link in the lower left. If you are interested, there are links to more content.